Well, I'm excited for this message as we continue going through Genesis. And there's something I was thinking about even just as I was walking up here, and that is the way that we view time versus the way that historically the people of the Bible viewed time. And I think it's an important lesson as Connection Point Church, as we as a church family go through life, to understand that the way we view time isn't the only way to view time. We view time linearly, maybe, way to say it. In other words, you think of your age, you were a year younger last year, and now you're a year, and now you're a year older next year, and you can figure that out. But traditionally, one of the things when we look at how Jewish people, how historically ancient people looked at it, they viewed it more as a circle, but not really a circle, as a spiral. Kind of a helix, if you will, but it's seasons, and you're still progressing through time, but you're going through in a circle. In other words, the events that happen to you are going to happen again, and you're going to go through seasons again and again. In fact, when we went to Israel, John and I, a few years ago, one of the things we noticed is that they go to the same places, will crop up over and over again, and the same people or different people will go through the same lessons, the same places, and hopefully they learn a little bit more than the previous one. And God is taking us all kind of on this ride of we're all going to go through a winter, we're all going to go through a summer, we're going to go through a seasons, and hopefully, you have a February of 2021 where we lose all this power. Hopefully, we got to February 2022 and we were all crossing our fingers. We were like, okay, we hope the power people, we hope they learned a little bit. We hope that this time around, we hope there are some lessons that have been learned. And that's kind of how we go through the Bible in our relationship with God. You've got to understand is that if you just view it as mountains and valleys and you're on one line, then man, it's a lot harder to go through life that way. But when you understand it's kind of cyclical, you're going to go through winter, you're going to go through some summers, and each time you go around, you can learn a little bit. And the same goes for church. You grow up in church and you learn some lessons, but hopefully in this church, our mission is to lead people from where they are to where God wants them to be. And that process isn't a straight line. It's going through. We're going to go through some summers together, and each time God's going to shape us a little more. And hopefully you're going to get to this place where you have this confident, fearless faith. Now, you may or may not have been here last week. Last week we had a big announcement. We announced last week that we had signed a contract and we were in the process of investigating whether or not we were going to purchase 3 acres of land in North Wiley. Y'all can go ahead and give that an applause. It's very exciting. All right. Now, the caveat of that is I have no knowledge of construction. I have no knowledge of what if this is a good deal or not, other than the price is good. And the seller said yes. But I have no idea what I'm doing. And if you haven't figured that out by now, well, hey, you got a surprise coming. But I go into the town hall of St. Paul this past week, and it was me and Matt Masulo, and we go in, and we're just going to introduce ourselves, and we're going to start figuring out, okay, where do we go from here? What do we do? And it was funny because the first thing I thought about was about 15 years ago, before any of y'all were actually at this church, it was very few of us, me, Matt, my brother, we went in and tried to buy another building, okay, and some land. Only we didn't have any resources, okay? We had nothing. And we went in, and there was a multimillionaire that owned this building that we thought, man, that'd be a great building. He didn't care about this building at all. He had bought it just because his friend needed to sell it, so he just bought it and said, yeah. We go to him, and we make the craziest pitch looking back on it. It's just us. We had a church of probably, I'm guessing, 30 to 40 people. We had no savings. We were renting a school at like $120 or $200 a week. It was not a lot of money that we had, and we were barely, it was a situation where we go in and we have grand visions. And we go in and talk to this guy, and we're negotiating like $10,000 a month, or like way above. If this guy had said yes, I don't know what we'd have done. He asked us who we're going to use for our contractor, and we're like, oh, we're not going to use a contractor. And in our minds, we were like, we're just going to put what we've got, the pipe and drapes and whatever, we're just going to put them on the wall. I don't know. We had no clue what we were doing, okay? Had that guy said yes, we would have been in so much trouble. People would have walked into this old shop that did not look like a church, and they would have said, "What is going on in here?" We wouldn't have been able to buy a sign. We hadn't thought that far through, so you probably wouldn't have found us anyway. But as we were going through the town hall, there was this part of me of, man, we've been through this before, but it was different this time. It was just different because all of a sudden I knew there's still 1,000 things I don't know. I knew there are all these what ifs, and this is so much more pressure because we actually have like a lot of money. We've saved a lot of money. I mean, we've saved quite a bit of money, and so we had $350,000 of cash that we were going to put towards this. And all of a sudden in my mind, I had this moment where I'm thinking, man, Joel, what if you screw this up? I had this what if, Joel, if you screw this and this isn't your money, this is our money that we have trusted the Lord. Joel, what if? And I started thinking, Joel, what if you miss this, or what if you don't see this, or what if? And it never overwhelmed me this time though. Whereas looking back on it, it should have overwhelmed me 15 years ago. It should have been like, Joel, what if this happened? But this time it didn't. And I'll tell you why. There's one difference. Because we have an elder board right now where I am a moron when it comes to construction, but we got Phil Collins who does construction every single day, he oversees crews, contract, all that stuff. We've got John Williams who's been running a company that does construction, deals with TxDOT, deals with all these things all the time. Mike Martini is a civil engineer, and he knows exactly, this is what he does every day, is he looks at properties, he designs them, things. And before on Monday, we walked in there, and they're asking us questions like, have you talked to the SUD? I didn't know what an SUD was. And I look at my phone, and Mike Martini said, hey, by the way, I've already talked to the SUD. And I was like, yeah, we've already talked to the SUD. It was great. But this is one of the things I want you to see about this process is the what ifs are still there. And if it was just about me, this what ifs of, man, what if I screw this up? What if this is a weakness in what if my weaknesses screw this up? But no longer are we operating in the what ifs. Now we've got this who will. Every time there's a problem, I just get on a text or a Marco Polo for us, and I just ask, who knows this? And in fact, most of the time it's already taken care of because we've got people who are taking care of these. So it's not as much about what am I going to do about these problems? What am I going to do because I don't know what I'm doing or what's the next step should be? But all of a sudden I've got this who. I can just go and ask and say, I've got people with me that even when I might make some mistakes or I might say, I think we should do this. And I've got people saying, no, this is what we're going to do. This is how you do it. In fact, the process is being laid out for me. And I've just got them kind of saying, okay, Joel, you do this. We'll take care of it. Okay, we'll do the big things. I was thinking and wrestling with this week about how just great it is that we have this great opportunity, and it's not overwhelming for me. In fact, I'm excited. It's fearless right now because I know whether or not we move forward with this land, it's going to be the right decision because we have the right who. And when I was thinking about going through Genesis, one of the things that as we circle back through, and you may have been through the stories of Genesis, you may have read the whole Bible, this may be your first circle through, but I want to just kind of refine this a little bit for us. Because as we go back through, there's so many Christians who live with this faith of what if. In fact, it's shocking to me how many Christians live with a fear or maybe a shame, and it comes out different ways, a shame, a guilt. And that guilt is just a fear that God's going to, smite me or God's going to come and do what he should have done a long time ago. That shame is just a fear that I'm going to be found out who I really am. But we live with this fear that we shouldn't live with if you are following Jesus. If you are a Christian and you have this guilt, this fear, today what I want to do is lift this off. I want to show you how we can have a fearless faith. Because you should live every day knowing that the what ifs are going to be there. What if I lose my job? What if my kids don't turn out the way I thought they were going to turn out? Hey, what if the worst happens? What if I get a diagnosis that I don't like? What if my family or something? What if? They're always going to be there. The reason as Christians, what if that sin that I've been hiding, what if it gets found out? Hey, what if? But we've got something better than what if. The what ifs are all about, can I fix this? Can I take care of this? Can I make the right decisions? Can I overcome my weaknesses and come better? But we have a who will, and that's what I want you to see in this. Following Christ is not about the what ifs. What if you can figure this out? What if you can't figure this out? Instead, we have a faith in a who will. And that's the big idea today. I'm going to show you, we're going to continue through Genesis. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 26, and I want to show you a fearless faith of a man named Isaac. Okay, we're going to be in Isaac, and you're going to recognize these stories. We're coming, it's spaced repetition, but we're coming back. We're repeating, and you're going to see these seasons come through, and all of us have some of these seasons. All right, and so it seems out of place if you were here last week, and this sometimes in Genesis happens. We'll be going through the life of Jacob, and today we're not even going to mention Jacob. We're just going to talk about his father. But it's important, and at the end, I'm going to tell you why this chapter is stuck in here, why it may seem out of place, okay? But what I want you to see before we get there is I want you to see this fearless faith that God is making in Isaac, who is Jacob's father, and it is Abraham, who we went through last year. It's Abraham's son, okay? Isaac is the promised son for Abraham, and today we're going to learn some things about him. Verse 1 says, before I get there, the big idea I want you to see is that trusting in God builds a fearless faith. Trusting specifically in God's promises. His promises is what builds a fearless faith. We're going to see this. Now, there was a famine in the land, and besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham, if you were here last year, do y'all remember Abraham had a famine? Do y'all remember this? I want somebody to yell this out, the bravest soul in here, whoever it's going to be. Yell out, where did Abraham go the first time a famine came? Egypt. All right. Jonathan, very good. Man, he's bold. Y'all know he's sitting in the same seat where I preached right on top of him 2 weeks ago, and he came back. He went to Egypt, right? So listen to this. They say this, Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, which is the second place when this happened, that a famine happened, where Abraham went. And the Lord appeared to Isaac this time and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land which I shall tell you, sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your offsprings I will give you all these lands. And I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven. I will give to your offspring these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge and commandments and my statutes and my laws. Now, it starts off with something that you may think, okay, we're going to, he's given these charts, and he's going to specifically, he repeated the promises he had made to Abraham, and he adds one, okay? So I want to just kind of show you these. But it's these promises that are important, the promises of God, because when we talk about faith in the Old Testament right now, we're not talking about a faith in God, like his existence. When you talk about or think about, do I have faith, a lot of times you think, do I have faith in the existence of God? Okay, they're not wrestling with that in the Old Testament. Everyone believes in a God. What they're wrestling with when it comes to faith is this strange, weird, crazy belief that God would actually promise his creation, that God would make promises to bless and to help his creation. Because every other God in every other surrounding area, every other neighborhood, every other God, they had demands of the people, but they never made promises for the people. The faith here is that we have a God that kind of likes us. We have a God that isn't just here that we are supposed to do his bidding and appease him and always be sacrificing, there were neighboring people that were sacrificing their own children to appease the gods. And all of a sudden we have this God that appears, and instead of demanding something, he says, hey, I'm going to make you some promises, and you don't even have to do anything other than stick with me, trust me. If you'll trust me, if you'll believe in these promises and trust me, man, I will bless you. Here are the three promises that he repeats from Abraham. The first one is, I will give you these lands. Okay, it started off with this, we say promised land because Abraham literally had no place. He was wandering, and God said, I'm going to give you this land. It was the promised land. And so I want y'all to see this first one, is that God says, hey, I'm going to make room for you. Y'all say make room. All right, make room. That's going to be a big one today, okay? He says, I'm going to make room for you. That's a promise that God made for these people that have no land. I'm going to make room. The next one I'm going to multiply your offspring, okay? In other words, he's going to keep this going. Y'all say keep this going. He's going to keep this going. You know, sometimes good things happen to us, and you're like, oh my gosh, God's going to, eventually this is going to fall down. There's no way I can keep this going. God said he's going to keep this going through generations. He's going to keep it going. The next one is he's going to bless all the nations through this family, all the nations. So here's what he's saying. He's saying if he'll bless Isaac, he'll bless you. If he'll bless Isaac, he'll bless me. Y'all say if he bless Isaac, he'll bless me. If he bless Isaac, he'll bless me. Those are the promises, okay? But now he adds this other caveat into this promise. Look in verse 3. He says, and I will be with you and bless you. And now he didn't say this to Abraham, but now he's saying this to his son. He's saying, listen, not only am I going to bless you, I'm going to be with you. That's a promise. I will be with you. I'm saying that, it reminds me of a movie. I'm not even going to go into it. With, that's a funny word when you say it out loud in front of 100 people. But as I was thinking about this idea, it's no longer just God just doing stuff for us. The promise is no longer, hey, God will bless you. He'll give you some stuff. All of a sudden, the promise is that God wants to be with you. He will go with you. And there's a big difference between a God who's up there and he'll do stuff for you, but there's still kind of that mindset. And some of us grew up in church of God is way up there. And so as long as I'm up there, as long as I'm doing good, as long as I'm thumping along and I'm obeying the commands and I'm doing whatever my church tells me to do, as long as I'm doing that, God's going to bless me. But if I go down here, if I go down into the low parts, if I screw up, if I get away, if make my Sunday teacher mad. I had a Sunday school teacher, and if you made him mad, he'd put you in a room and he would shut the door. It was awful. I never got shut. I don't think I did, but I had a friend who every week would just get locked in a room. And looking back on it, that was not good for his theology, no matter what the church taught, okay? So we go through and I want you to see, though, I will be with you, that's different. I was reading an article this week. There was a man, his name was Joe Cerna. He was a veteran, and he had been through 4 tours in Iraq. He 3 times had almost lost his life. And the last time that he almost lost his life, every single person in the caravan that was with him died. He was the only survivor. He had PTSD, and he was struggling. He was struggling with alcohol because that was the only thing that could really make his PTSD get any type of relief. And so he screwed up. He got a DWI, and he has to go before a judge. And in fact, the program he was in, he had to go in front of the judge for 25 days. He had to go for an entire month in front of a judge, the same judge every single day. Gets to the end of it. He's almost done. He's been in front of this judge. The judge's name was Judge Oliveira. Now, he came in, and on one of the last days, he's been showing up, he's been doing it, but there's a minimum sentence for that DWI, and so he is going to have to do it. But he's been in front of this judge for now 25 times, and so the judge says, I'm going to sentence you to the minimum sentence, and that's 24 hours in jail. You're going to have to go to jail. And he breaks down, he tries to explain to the judge, I just don't think I can do it. He says, when I am alone, he says, that's when my PTSD, that's when I cannot be alone, locked in a cell. It brings up too much. And then the judge does something interesting. The judge was a Green Beret in his former career. And the judge then sentences himself to 24 hours, and he serves the sentence in the cell with Joe Cerna. And in fact, Joe Cerna was talking about this. They ate meatloaf, and they did not sleep at all. And so he spends the whole day or the whole evening, the night, eating bad meatloaf, they said, and talking about their experiences in the war. And he comes back the next week. He does the rest of the month coming before him. And the last day, this is what he said to the judge. He said this. He said, that one night was the first time I ever opened up. He said, to trust another person for me was a game changer. He said, thank you so much for being there for me. It means a lot to have someone there for me. And it illustrates this idea of you can even go to prison. You can go into the worst things if you know, man, someone is coming with me. So when we have this promise of God, what I want you to see is this fearless faith lives as if this is always true. We choose to say, no matter where I go, the promises of God are going to follow me even when I screw up. Even if I'm in jail because I got a DUI, even if I have screwed up majorly, the promises of God are going to follow me, not because I deserve it, but because God is with me. And so what happens next, again, if you've been through the life of Abraham, you're about to roll your eyes. You're about to say, no way. If this is your first time, you're going to think, this is still a strange story. What we're going to see is that God is building his faith, his fearless faith, even in his failures. God is building a fearless faith in you, even in your failures. Now, what happened next, it says, so Isaac settled in Gerar, and when the men of this place asked him about his wife, he said, she is my sister. Now, if this is your first time, that's kind of weird. But if you find out that his father did this twice in his father's lifetime, he got in fear of the king, and so he would pass off his wife as his sister because his wife was really good looking, and the kings at that time had the power, the authority to just say to the man, hey, go kill that guy because I want his wife. And they could take his wife into his harem or marry her. And so to avoid this, hey, this is just my sister. Of course, that's a lot of problems in this situation for several reasons. First of all, if you say that, there's a good chance in this time and age that your wife could just be taken, okay, if she's not married. She could just be taken or seduced or however it's going to be. But remember also, there's this promise that is attached not just to him, but to his wife. God's promise is to multiply these generations, come through his children, and she's going to be the one bearing these children. So if she's now somebody else's wife, well, you can see the problems here. Nevertheless, he feared to say, my wife, thinking lest these men should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. And when he had been out a long time, Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked out the window and he saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. We'll come back to that word laughing and we'll explore what it means. Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, she is your wife. How then could you say she is my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I thought lest I die because of her. And Abimelech said, what is this that you have done to us? One of these people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon all of us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, whoever touches this man or his wife will surely be put to death. Now, surely this is crazy, right? Surely this is crazy. It's the third time we've seen somebody pass off his wife as his sister. One of the things I want you to see, though, is this. In all of this, there's this word, by the way, well, let me touch on this word real quick. This word laughs. Isaac's mother laughed when she found out she was going to be pregnant. And so there's this play on the word laughing, okay? Isaac has an older brother, Ishmael, who was sent off, and he was sent off after he had played with or laughed, the same root of this verb. In other words, there's this idea around Isaac that he has this mocking kind of heart of God's promise. He knows God's promises are there, but he was kind of birthed out of this idea that, yeah, God has made promises, but his promises, I still have to do a lot. His mother thought, you know what, we still have to finagle this and trick this up to make this actually happen. We can't just trust God fully. And so now we see this come up. This is a euphemism, obviously, because what he apparently saw is from his window, he was able to see a husband and wife fooling around, and he knew, okay, that's not what brothers and sisters do. There's something else going on here. Now, there's this overtone of, man, Isaac is kind of mocking. He's not trusting God. He's mocking these promises in this. And so it's interesting that the pagan king is the one who says, you're breaking God's laws. You're going to bring guilt from God on us. And so he's the one that has to say, we're not going to do this. It's very interesting that Isaac doesn't trust, but Abimelech is pretty much, hey, we're following God's rules here, and God protects this promise through a pagan king. It's very interesting how God is going to make sure this promise happens. Before we go any further, I want you to think about this. How do you react when you screw up or sin? How does it affect your view of God? Now, for me, if I had done this, by the way, most of us would be divorced, right? After we're agreed, this is This isn't a minor thing, handing your wife off to save your tail. This is not something that is going to help out, your situation in most. How would you feel if you'd betrayed your wife? How do you feel if you betrayed someone, or maybe you're stuck in the same sin pattern that your family's? Maybe you're an addict, and your father struggled with it, or your mother struggled with it, and now you're back in it, and you're like, man. When you struggle with any addiction, whether it's, maybe it's a negativity of talking bad about people, maybe it's pornography, maybe it's something that you're struggling with, and you have this, oh man, I did it again. You're at your lowest points. How do you view God how does God view you when you're at your lowest point? Now, many of us, even those who grew up in church, we have this idea of, man, when I screw up, God's mad at me. When I screw up, God does not like me. God does not want me. I shouldn't go to church today because if he knew how I lived this week. We have this idea of the Old Testament. I even hear this Old Testament, God smites everybody and all this. But let's go back and let's look and see, how does God respond when somebody screws up so much that the very least we know Isaac's sleeping on the couch for like a month, right? We know this, right? How does God respond? Look at verse 12. And Isaac sowed in the land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him. Man, this is not the picture. Some of us need to let go of this picture we have of God who's always against us. Understand, when we're in this promise, when we're in this generations, when we're in these promises of God, God is with us even when we screw up, even when we disobey, even when we fail. And it's not something that was made up in the New Testament. It's not as if Jesus came up with the idea. It's the whole way we see God loves his people. His whole Bible is a plan of how he's going to redeem and bring us into all of us into these promises. That promise, remember, was not just for one family. It was, I want to bless everyone through trusting in these promises. Even in his weakness, in his failures, in his sin, his struggle, his shame, God blessed him. He was still with him. He did not leave him. Now, the next thing is that you're going to see God is building a fearless faith, not just in the failures, but also in victories. Because sometimes we get to the top. Sometimes we get to the top and we think we got to hold on, or we think, man, I've fooled him long enough. My father-in-law, anytime he goes to an ATM back in the day, he would always say, I tricked him again as he walked off. That's what he would say every single time as he'd come off with his cash. It was a very good dad joke. I still use it to this day, by the way. But there's this idea sometimes when things are going well that, man, when is this going to end? There's no way I could stay in this blessing because I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to go back to an addiction. I'm going to go back into that cycle. I'm going to go back. Well, so what happens next, and I'm just going to paraphrase 15 through 21. He starts digging some wells in this land now that he's got some protection. He is not as fearful. But he was scared of the king. He didn't think he was powerful enough, even though he is rich. He was rich before the 100-fold. Now he's mega rich, okay? And so he starts digging the wells, and specifically he digs wells where his father had dug wells. And the people of the land are not very smart, because as soon as Abraham dies, they fill in all these wells so that his family won't come back to these wells. But the crazy thing is they could have his family had moved on. They could have just used these wells. And so he starts digging these wells again, and every time he digs a well, people get all mad at him. All the people are like, hey, that's my well. You can't dig my well. And so what happens is he'll dig a well, there'll be a fight, and then he'll go to the next place. He'll dig a well, be a fight, and he'll go to the next place. Until we get to verse 22, it says this. He moved from there, and he dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, now the Lord has made room for us. Y'all say, make room. Make room. This promise has come to fruition. We shall be fruitful in the land. So he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him that same night that he finally found water. He finally found this, and the Lord said, fear not, I am with you. Fear not, don't be fearful. You're going to have a fearless faith, not because you're good, not because you're smart, not because you're strong, but because I am with you, and will bless you and multiply you, your offspring, for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there. He called upon the name of the Lord. He pitched his tent there, and Isaac's servants dug a well. It goes on in verse 33, we see that Abimelech actually is now fearful of him. Abimelech comes and he makes a treaty with Isaac. Now, the crazy thing about this chapter is this. You might even, if you just read through the Bible, you'll go almost straight from Abraham to Jacob, and it introduces Jacob, and then we have this little story of Isaac, and then we're not going to hear from Isaac much anymore. So why is this chapter even in here? One of the things you need to recognize about this chapter is every single one of these events I just described to you. The promise is made in the beginning, him passing his wife off as his sister, the digging of the wells, and the treaty, all of these things his father Abraham had experienced. So the point of this chapter is the writer is showing us everything that happened to Abraham has come back around, and these promises that were made to Abraham have now been passed on. Abraham is dead, and the promise that these are going to go through generations has passed on. And so now every promise that was for Abraham is now Isaac's promise. They are fully Isaac's promise. That's what the author or the writer of this is trying to show us, is now, man, God is doing what he said he's going to do, and now Isaac has all these promises. Not based on how good he is, not based on how smart he is or anything. God has just given him these promises. In fact, when you think about the Old Testament of this book, it is simply the lineage of God's promise being passed down. People try to screw it up, people rebel, people do the wrong things, but God keeps passing his promises down. And so what I want you to see is the number one thing. How was Isaac so confident in his faith to dig a well? How many of you dig a well, and this is a big process. They're digging hundreds of feet down. I don't even know how they do it back then. How many of us, we spend months digging a well, and then somebody comes and takes it, and you go do it again, how many of us eventually look and say, God hates me, God does not like me, God doesn't want me to drink water, what if I can't drink water, I'm gonna die? How many of us, that's where our minds go? Right, all of us. Isaac, what does he say? God made me this promise, and even when I screwed it up, God was with me and blessed me, so I'm just going to go over here, and eventually God's going to make room. And he has this faith that this promise of God is not leaving him because he's on a little bit of a struggle, or a lot of struggle. Not drinking water for a while seems like a big struggle. But he has this faith, God is with me, God's promise did not leave me. And eventually we see as he keeps trusting in these promises, his faith, because he went through the sin and the struggle, and God was still with him. Because he went through the failures of the wells and the water, all of a sudden he gets this victory. And in victory, he has a fearless faith. This isn't going to be, I'm not going to screw this up because this isn't me. This is God is going to bless me. That's the faith that I want us to have as Christ followers, to understand every single thing about this. The Old Testament is this promises God is making for your life. He's making these promises so that he can bless you in your lowest times and your highest times. And eventually it's going to come to Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is God with us. That's what his name is given, God with us. When we follow Christ, it's not a belief that we're going to be perfect. It's going to be even in our failures, our sinful struggles that we repeat and repeat. He is going to be with us, and he is going to overcome them. It's really hard to live a faith when you got a lot of what ifs. And I want to just let y'all know how this plays out in my life lately. In 2020, some of y'all know this, I went to the doctors, and the doctor gave me a report that I had early onset heart disease, and that it was really bad for somebody my age. In fact, basically, that doctor said, you're probably going to die of heart attack or heart disease. And I was like, that's great. And he says, but then he said, I want you to go do this thing. And he sent me to do a heart scan. And then he left his practice, okay? He left his practice and started one. So I didn't have a doctor. And the only thing I got back was a report from this heart scan. And on the heart scan, it told me what he had told me, that he thinks, with my history and all this. But then it said, and at the bottom it said, and we found multiple nodules in your lungs. We think it's a less than 5% chance of cancer. Check back next year. And then I had no one to call, all right, we'll just leave that. And 5%, that seems pretty good to your odds, right? To me, 5% was, wow. And so I had to go a whole year. I found a new doctor, and the doctor said, well, okay, we got to go get this checked out. And so he scheduled my insurance. It didn't accept it at first. So I was like, okay, God doesn't want me to go have this thing. And so I skipped for 6 months. I didn't have this scan because I had these what ifs. Man, what if I got cancer? What is my wife going to do? What what if that happens, what's going to happen to her? And I'm sure she's smart. She'll make it, but man, what's going to? And then I thought about my kids, and I know I got kids all over the place. I got kids in college, kids in high school, kids in middle school, kids in elementary school. I was like, man, what is going to happen to my kids? How are they going to go without me? And I got one in high school. He's struggling and things. And then I got this one here, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? She needs me. And I had this guilt coming over me of how could you do this to them? And I was dealing for 6 months with this guilt of how could I do that to my family? What if this happened? And then I thought about you guys, and I thought, what would the church? Surely y'all can't make it without me. Sure. No, I'm just kidding. But I came back to, man, even if this happens, we have a who will. And I started thinking, you know what? God will take care of my wife. We got insurance too, but God will bless my wife. God is going to take care of my family. God is going to do it. That's who. And I started thinking about this church. We've raised up great leaders. God is going to take care of this church. God is there. And even with my life, my eternity, I started thinking, man, God will take care of that too. Man, and so I scheduled it, and by the time I went there, I was like, listen, in my mind, even if this happens, hey, God is going to take care of this. The best is yet to come no matter what happens. Even with me, the best is yet to come. I had to, and I was excited when I came through, and I got a good report, and I don't have cancer, and it was just a relief. But even in that, I was like, either way this goes, God is with me. That's what I want for us. I want you to have a faith that even in your lowest points, just like Isaac, God is with you. So here's what I want to do. We're going to close up. I'm going to go, band, y'all can go ahead and band, get up there. And by the way, the clock keeps resetting, so I have no idea how long I'm going. Are we an hour in, 2 hours? I hope not. It says I got 28 minutes left, Joey. Just so y'all know what I'm dealing with here. Here's what I want you to think. Here's what I want. We always need to respond to God's word, okay? We need to respond. You've encountered God's word. You need to respond to this. You might have made a misstep this week. You might have made many missteps, but I want to remind us, church is not about we didn't come here to be perfect. I can't cleanse. There's nothing I can do for you, but God is with you. When you trust Jesus, here's some of the promises Jesus made. Jesus says that wherever I am, there you will be also. That's the eternal promise. He goes to prepare a place for us wherever he is. His best friend John said this. He says, to those who receive him, who believe in his name, he gives them the right to become children of God. If you want to know how you can live with these promises, all you've got to do is receive them. You trust, you live your life saying, God, it's not about me, it's about you. We call it being saved or giving our lives to Jesus, but it's just a decision that we make daily. We're going to live our life as if God is on the throne of our life, as if he is with us in the highs and the lows. In fact, right now, as the band plays, you might be making that decision. You don't have to come tell me. You don't have to do anything. You can let us know. Maybe you need to take a step of faith. Maybe right now, God is saying, you know what? I've been with you, but you haven't been with me. And I want to encourage us. As we respond to God, just ask, what is the next step God's calling me to take? And it may be that you need to have a conversation. It may be that somebody in your life, you need to go and walk them through something. It may be that you've got some fears in your life that you don't want to confront. But imagine what life would be like for this church if we all had a fearless faith, knowing that God is with me. Even if I've screwed this up, hey, God is with my kids. If I will just continue to trust in his promises. And so as we worship right now, that's kind of where I want us to end. And there are a lot of ways you can take this. Maybe you have fears with finances. Maybe you have fears with some sin or struggle you have, and you've never had the courage to actually take action and get some accountability or reach out for some help. Maybe you need to take a step of faith in your walk with Christ. Maybe you've never been baptized. We don't push a lot. Maybe some of you need to take a step of faith and say, you know what, I need to go public. I need to make sure that I'm following Jesus. Because here's what I know. A strong faith leads to a fearless walk. And you can build your faith in the weak times and in the high times. God is building your faith when you look back and say, he was with me then, and he'll be with me even when he brings me where I'm supposed to be. Because we don't live in the what ifs. We live with the who will. Let's pray. Lord, my hope and my faith for this church is that we are confident, not in how great we are or how we're going to overcome our sin or how we're going to be gooder, but instead we're confident that you love us and you made a promise even when we were at our weakest. So Lord, my prayer for us today is that we won't just go through life as if, man, it's all on me. I've got to do this. What if? Lord, as we respond to you, just open our hearts, make us bold to be able to say, God, I need you at all costs. I need these promises in my life. And so I'm going to trust you 100% of the time that you are always with me. It's in the name of Jesus we pray.